Chapter 16. Rip Van Winkle. A man went to sleep and woke up after 20 long years. How on earth did this happen? And what happened after he woke up? This is a story about a man named Rip Van Winkle. In a village among the Catskill Mountains, there lived a simple, good-natured man called Rip Van Winkle. The children of the village loved him. He assisted at their sports and made their playtimes. He also taught them to fly kites and shoot marbles and told them stories. Rip helped everyone in their work but could not keep his own farm in order. His fence fell to pieces. His cows strayed. Weeds grew in his field. His wife complained about his idleness. His son, Rip, inherited his habits. His sole follower was his dog, Wolf. Rip used to sit and talk with his friends on long summer days. Nicholas Vetter, the landlord of the village inn, was Rip's good friend. Rip had to leave his group eventually as his wife complained that his friends encouraged his idle habits. But basically his nature was an idle person. He would not do any work, and his own farm fence was turning bad. He wouldn't do. His wife was always complaining about him, and his son, whose name also was Rip, also continued and had the same nature as his father. Rip Van Winkle's wife would always be complaining about this idle nature of his. Rip Van Winkle had a very good friend, Nicholas Vader, who was the village inn owner. But Rip had to leave his friends because of the constant complaining of his wife, which always was that he was idle and not doing any work. Poor Rip was reduced almost to despair. He started walking away into the woods with Wolf. On one of these days, Rip had gone high up the Catskill Mountains. From there, he looked down into a deep dark valley. Evening was gradually advancing. He felt that he should return home. As he was about to go down, he heard a voice from the distance calling, "Rip Van Winkle, Rip Van Winkle." So Rip Van Winkle was so unhappy because of his wife's complaining that he felt very sad. He was very sad, and he started walking away towards the mountain, away from the village towards the mountain with his dog Wolf. And for a few days he kept on moving, and when one day when it was becoming very dark, he wanted to come back home. He heard someone calling him by his name. He saw a strange figure slowly coming up the rocks. He carried something heavy on his back. Coming closer, Rip saw a short old man with thick, bushy hair and beard. He made signs for Rip to assist him with the load. Always helpful, Rip did so. So when Rip looked at the person, he saw that it was a strange person whom he did not know, and it was an old man with beard and very thick hair, and he was carrying something heavy on his back. So, and he also gestured to Rip to help him, and Rip otherwise was a very helpful person, although he was idle, but being with that helpful nature, he went to assist that man to help him carry the load that was on his back. They came to a round hollow surrounded by trees. On a level spot of the center, he saw a most unusual crowd of people playing at ninepins. Now, when they reached, he was helping that man to carry that bag, and as they reached to a hollow spot, he saw that there were a crowd of people who were playing ninepins. Ninepins is a very ancient game which you have heard. There are 9 bottles or pins which are kept and is hit with a ball and has to fall down. He looked peculiar. All the people, they looked very peculiar. One had a large head, broad face, and small piggish eyes. This is the description of one man. The face of another seemed to consist entirely of nose. He had a big nose. They all had beards of various shapes and colors. They were enjoying themselves, yet were silent. They were playing, and yet they were very quiet. They looked at Rip with a fixed statue-like gaze. When they saw Rip, they were gazing at him, staring at him. His companion, it seemed, was carrying some liquid in a keg on his back. Keg is the carrier in which you carry any liquid, and that was on his back. This was unloaded and everyone drank from the keg. Rip was fearful at first. After a while, his fear subsided. So this old man whom Rip was assisting, he was carrying some kind of a liquid on his back, and when he brought it to these people, they all drank from it. Initially, Rip was also fearful to drink, but he also had from it. After a while, his fear subsided. Feeling thirsty, he had several drinks himself. Slowly his eyes closed. He fell into a deep sleep. So since Rip was already thirsty, he had one drink, then another, and he carried on having a lot of drinks. And finally he started feeling sleepy and he went off to sleep. On waking, he found himself on the high hill where he had first seen the old man. It was a bright sunny morning. The birds were twittering among the bushes. Surely, thought Rip, I have not slept here all night. He whistled for Wolf, but no dog was to be seen. He decided to visit the scene of last evening. When he reached the spot, he was surprised to see that a mountain stream was now flowing through it. Now, Rip went off for a long sleep, and when he got up, he woke up at the high hill, the Catskill Mountain. There he woke up, where he had first seen the old man. And it was bright and sunny because it was a morning time, and he could hear the birds chirping, and he thought that he couldn't have slept there for the whole night. He thought that he was thinking to himself that he must have not slept for the whole night, and he started calling out for his dog Wolf, and there was no dog. Then he went back to the spot where he had been at night, and when he reached there, he was surprised to see that there was no one there and there was a river flowing there. What was it that must have happened? Let's see. What was to be done? The morning was passing away and poor Rip was hungry. He shook his head and went homeward. As he came near his village, he met many people he had never seen before. This surprised him, as he thought he knew everyone around his village. They all stared at him with surprise. Rip suddenly noticed that his beard had grown a foot long. He saw his village was now larger with more people. There were rows of houses which he had never seen before. Strange names were over the doors. He found his own house was empty and in ruins. He called loudly for his wife and children. All was silent. The village inn was gone. Now, since it was morning time and the morning was passing by, Rip was started to feel hungry. He started moving towards his village. When he reached his village, he found everything to be very strange because he couldn't even recognize the people that were there, whom he did recognize earlier. And he saw that a lot of things had changed in his village. There were rows of houses which were not there before, and there were different names which he didn't recognize on the doors of the houses. When his own house was empty, he couldn't even find his wife and children, and everything seemed to be very silent. He also realized that his own beard had grown very long, almost a foot, and he seemed to be strange too. He didn't seem to be normal as he was before. So the village that he stayed in seemed to be very different and strange to him. Probably it was gone. The appearance of Rip with his long beard and peculiar dress soon attracted the attention of people. Rip told them that he meant no harm, but merely came there to look for his friends and folks. He asked about Nicholas Vedder. There was silence for a little while. Then an old man replied, "Nicholas Vedder? Why, he died and gone for these 18 years. That means that it was 18 years that his friend Nicholas Vedder had died. And when he tried to ask people about his friends, no one really knew. Only about this Nicholas Vedder, an old man, told him. Rip also was attracting attention because of his attire, his old-fashioned old clothes and long clothes and the long beard, and people started to stare at him. Rip's heart died away at finding himself thus alone in the world. He cried out, "Does anyone here know Rip Van Winkle?" Now Rip was feeling very sad because he felt that he was left absolutely alone in the world, and he cried out, saying that, "Does anyone know who's Rip Van Winkle?" "Oh, there he is, leaning against the tree," exclaimed 2 or 3. As he looked, Rip saw a fellow who looked exactly like his previous self. He understood that this was his son Rip. Just then a young woman with a child came his way. She said that Rip Van Winkle had been her father and had gone away 20 years back when she was little. All stood amazed. An old woman looked at his face and exclaimed, "Sure enough, this is Rip Van Winkle. Well, welcome home, old neighbor. Where have you been these 20 long years?" Now, as the moment he said it, "Does anyone know Rip Van Winkle?" So everyone, there were 1-2 people standing close by. They said, "There he is, leaning against the tree," because Rip Van Winkle's son name was also Rip. So when he saw that his son, he recognized him because he was just his younger version. And then a young woman with a child in her hand came and saying that, yes, my father was Rip Van Winkle, and he left and went away when I was a small child, and that was almost 20 years back. And everyone was amazed to hear that. And then another old woman came out. That was his wife. She recognized him and said, "Where were you for all these 20 years? Welcome back home." Soon everyone came to know Rip's story, for the whole 20 years had been to him but as one night. Some had doubts and insisted that Rip had been out of his mind. Even to this day, a thunderstorm on a summer afternoon at Catskill reminds them of the strange people playing at a game of nine pins. Now, when everyone heard his story that for 20 years he was sleeping, everyone thought that probably he was out of his mind, because for Rip actually it was just one night. And so they insisted that he had been actually out of his mind, he was crazy. And even then, whenever there was a thunderstorm at the Catskill mountain, people were reminded of the strange story of Rip Van Winkle, which he had told them, of the strange people who were playing the game of nine pins.